and verse number 14. Let's revisit that together. Hebrews 4 and verse 14. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. Amen. Why do believers lose their faith? Why are there people who at some point have faith in God, and then at some point they lose their faith? That's right. I've even known people who taught in seminary, who taught Bible classes at universities, had preached and taught the Word of God for years, only to die as an infidel, an unbeliever, even in the existence of God. Do not think for a moment that it cannot happen to you. It can happen to any of us. But why does it happen? Why do believers lose their faith? We're going to endeavor to answer that question today, and we'll add some more answer to that again next Sunday and maybe even a third message, because I think it is so important. God not only wants us to start our faithful journey, He wants us to finish the faithful journey. He wants us to be able to say, as the Apostle Paul said, I have fought a good fight. Yeah. I have finished the course. Yeah. I have kept the faith. Right. And henceforth is laid up for me a crown of righteousness that will be given to me in that day, but not only to me, but for all of those who love His appearing. So how does it happen? Maybe there is a person in your family. At some point, they believed in God. They believed the Bible. They were an active church attender, and now they have lost their faith. They do none of those, and they do not understand why you are still faithful to your God. Why is it that believers lose their faith? Let's take the journey for a moment. God commissioned Moses to deliver the Israelites from Egyptian bondage. You remember that story, all too familiar. Exodus chapter 3 and verse 1. That story is presented to us. And then God demonstrated His power by bringing plagues upon Pharaoh and the rulers in Egypt. In Exodus chapter 7, we read about that. But in spite of all that God did for them, the Israelites wandered into unbelief. They wandered into unbelief while they were in the wilderness. Look at Hebrews chapter 3 and verse number 16. Hebrews chapter 3 and verse number 16. As the Hebrew writer captures what happened to them, he said, "For who provoked him when they had heard? Indeed, did not all those who come out of Egypt led by Moses? And with whom was he angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient?" No doubt you would say that if I saw God part the Red Sea, I would believe Him from now on. They saw God open up the Red Sea. They not only saw the Red Sea open, they walked through the Red Sea on dry land. They saw the miracles of God, but yet they lost their faith. How did that happen? How in the world did they come to the point where they no longer trusted God? They no longer believed God. They no longer obeyed God. I want to show you how that happened. And it is an interesting scenario. For the Hebrews of the Old Testament, their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Their personal participation, next frame, contradicted their religious resolution. Their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Let's say that together. Their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Let's say it again. Their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. One more time. Their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Now that's what happened to them. That's why they lost their faith. There was a personal contradiction within them. Now you've probably talked to someone who have lost their faith. They point an accusing finger at the church. They point an accusing finger at believers. And they say, I am where I am because of y'all. I'm where I am because the church messed up. I'm where I am because I see contradiction in other people. Can I tell you that the reason people lose their faith is because there is a contradiction within them. There is a contradiction within them. And I want to show you that in just a moment. Let's go back to Hebrews chapter 4 and verse number 2. Hebrews chapter 4. The Hebrews, their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Now, Hebrews 4 and verse number 2. For indeed, we have had good news preached to us, just as they also, but the word they heard did not profit them. You see that? They heard the word, but the word they heard did not profit them. Why? It was not united by faith in them that heard it. Now, there was nothing wrong with the word. The problem was not in the one who delivered the word. The problem was in the ones who heard the word. When they heard, they did not unite faith with what they heard. Remember, we talked about faith several weeks ago. Faith is what I do about what I believe. So when they heard the word of faith, they didn't do anything. Now, they made a commitment, but they didn't keep their commitment. And so their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Now, let me show you that. I'm going to start out by showing you their religious resolution. They had resolved to obey God. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 31. Exodus 4 and verse number 31. Notice what the Bible will teach us there. Exodus chapter 4 and verse number 31. Exodus 4 verse 31. So the people what? Believed. They believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about the sons of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, then they did what? Bowed low and worshiped. Now, they heard, they believed, and they started worshiping. Isn't that wonderful? But now let's go to Exodus chapter 14 and verse number 31. Exodus chapter 14 and verse number 31. Notice what the Bible will tell us there. When Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people did what? Feared the Lord. And they believed in Moses, and rather they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Now that's a good start, isn't it? They saw the power of God demonstrated, and they feared and they believed. Now go down to Exodus chapter 19 and verse number 9. Let's notice the good start they made. Exodus chapter 19 and verse number 9. The Lord said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever. Isn't that amazing? They started off with a tremendous religious resolution. They believed in Moses, and they resolved to worship God. Let's stay right there in Exodus chapter 19. Let's back up to verse number 7. Exodus chapter 19 and verse 7. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Now, isn't that wonderful? They said, Moses, we are going to do everything that the Lord said do. That's great, isn't it? That's a wonderful start. They said, Moses, just tell us what the Lord said. We're going to do it. We're going to do everything. All the words. As a matter of fact, look at verse 8 again. Moses was so impressed. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought the words of the people to the Lord. Moses was so excited, he came back to God and said, God, the people are going to do exactly what you said. We're ready to rock and roll now. We're ready to move forward. The people have made a commitment. They have said, Lord, we're going to do everything. Not part of it. We're going to do everything that you have said. Now, that's their religious resolution. They made a resolution. Now, let's look at their personal participation. They had begun to be disobedient. Let's back up to Exodus 15 and verse number 24. Exodus 15 and verse 24. So the people grumbled at Moses, saying, what shall we drink? They're grumbling. Now, notice how disobedience started. It started with what? Grumbling. Say that word, grumbling. How did it start? With what? Grumbling. How did their disobedience start? It didn't start with disobedience. It started with them what? Grumbling. It started with them grumbling. They didn't just get up the day after and say, listen, I know we made a commitment yesterday, but we're not going to do it. We decided we're not going to obey you. It started with what? Grumbling. So you got to be careful. Don't get in the grumbling category now, because if you get in the grumbling category, you are headed toward disobedience. If you get in grumbling category, you are headed toward disobedience. All right. Now watch the Bible. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 16 and verse number 2. The whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses. They grumbled against Moses in the wilderness. That's how it started. Now let's go over to Numbers chapter 16 and verse number 41. Let's keep on this journey. Numbers 16 and verse number 41. But on the next day, all the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron and said, you are the ones who caused the death of the Lord's people. They grumbled. They said, Moses, you're the one, you and Aaron are the one that's got all of these people killed. Now, isn't that amazing? Now, notice, they started out believing in the Lord and believing in Moses. They made a commitment to the Lord and they made a commitment to Moses. And here they are a little while later doing what? Grumbling. Grumbling. You know, grumbling will make you feel bad about whatever it is you're doing. If you're going to do it, go ahead and do it without grumbling. Grumbling just makes you feel bad. The more you grumble, the worse you feel. So they started out grumbling, and grumbling led up to their disobedience, and their disobedience caused them to be unfaithful and lose their faith. The people that you know And if it ever happens to you, your losing of your faith will start out with your grumbling. So you want to stay off the grumbling road, because where does the grumbling road lead? It leads to losing your faith. A person said one time, he said, if you want to stay out of the pig pen, you need to stay off of the pig path. Because if you keep walking on the pig path, you're going to end up in the pig pen. So when you realize that this road takes me to a place where I don't want to go, then you need to get off of that road. And grumbling led them to the point of disobedience, and disobedience led them to lose their faith. Now, so they're grumbling. Now watch the next thing. Let's go to Exodus chapter 32. Exodus 32 and verse number 1. Exodus 32 and verse number 1. So you got to be very careful with grumbling. Grumbling will make you feel so bad that you will do things you never imagined that you would do. Exodus 32. Now, when the people saw that Moses had delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, now here they are grumbling again. Come, make us a God who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. They started grumbling. Now, where was Moses? Moses went up into the mountain to commune with God. And here the people are in the valley saying, we don't know where he went. Now, isn't that amazing? The man went up to have a conversation with God, and the people in the valley saying, we don't know where he is. And so they asked Aaron, and Aaron made a golden calf, and they started worshiping it. Now, notice the journey. The journey started out grumbling, disobedience, and from disobedience to idol worship, having lost their faith, worshiping, entrusting something that cannot deliver. Now journey with me one other place, Numbers chapter 25 and verse number 1. Numbers chapter 25 and verse number 1. While Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. Now that's idolatry now. Now notice what happened. Notice their journey. They saw the miracles of God. They made a verbal commitment to God. They started out following him, and then they started grumbling. And then they started worshiping idol gods. Then they ended up acting like the people around them. Now let me give you a 21st century illustration of that. Here is a person who was faithfully worshiping the Lord. They made Sunday a priority to be in the place of worship, to encourage the other saints, and to be encouraged by them. And then they started grumbling about what was happening. And then they became disobedient. And so now, instead of them being in the place to worship on Sunday morning, they are just coming in from the club with the idol worshipers. They are washing and waxing their car at the house on Sunday instead of assembling together to worship the Lord. They are planning where they're going to go for celebration and recreation instead of coming together to worship the Lord. They are spending no private time studying the word and in prayer and singing praises to the God of heaven. Their faith has led them. They have become disobedient, and it came through their grumbling. See, whatever you grumble about, you develop a nasty attitude toward. How many of you, now take your deep breath. I know you don't want to admit this publicly. How many of you remember when you were younger and your parents would discipline you and you were so angry? You was mumbling. Now back in the day, you couldn't say it where they could hear it. You had to get outside the house. And so now you mumbling and grumbling, and you even had the nerve. I wish something would happen to her. Now, I know you're not going to admit that in church, but yes, some of you all, after your mama gave you a good beating, you say, I sure wish something would happen to her. I wish a hawk would come down and pick her up and take her on up into the tree or somewhere. Now, you didn't think like that long because you was depending on her to cook a meal in just a little while. But for a little while, you grumble and mumble. But you got over that. Now watch what happened. Look again at Numbers 25 in verse number 2. For they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. And the people ate and bowed down to their God. Now here's what will happen. Here's how people lose their faith. They develop resistance toward the people of God. They start mumbling and grumbling and complaining. They complain about the church. They complain about the preacher. They complain about the members. They complain about everything that's going on. And then they accept an invitation from the people who are opposed to God. And here the children of Israel have now accepted the invitation from the Moabites. And they are over there doing what the Moabites does. All right, look at verse 2 again. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Verse 3, so Israel joined themselves to Baal up here, and the Lord was angry against Israel. Verse 4, the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them. You see that? Take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. God said, execute them. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you slay his men who have joined themselves to Baal up here. Then behold, one of the sons of Israel came and brought to his relatives a Midianite woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the sons of Israel, while they were weeping at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Now drop down to verse number 4. Those who died, verse number 9. What did I say? Verse number 9. Verse number 9. Those who died by the plague were what? How many people died? How many people died? So why are we alarmed about COVID? God has a history of destroying rebellious people. Rebellious. Now notice what happened. Notice what happened. They made a commitment to follow the Lord. But instead of keeping that commitment, what do? They began to grumble. They began to grumble. And after they began to grumble, they became disobedient. And when they became disobedient to the Lord, they accepted the invite to the folk who were opposed to God. Now, if you'd have said to them when they came out of Egypt, could you see yourself ever worshiping idol gods? They would say, oh no, I'd never do that. No doubt if someone would say to you or say to me or to say to any of your friends, could you ever see yourself worshiping an idol god? They would say no. But through grumbling, disobedience, they accepted the invitation to do what they thought they would never do. So what happened to them? Why did they lose their faith? Their religious resolution, their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. See, here's how you make sure you don't lose your faith. Are you ready for this? Now, if you missed everything else, don't miss this part. Here's how you make sure that you don't lose your faith. Make sure that whatever you resolve to do, you do it. And if you do that, you'll never lose your faith. See, we lose our faith because of lack of behavior. They lost their faith. Why? They didn't do their commitment. Now, often people are unwilling to make a resolution for fear of failure. You've heard, no, I don't make resolution. I don't make promises. I don't make promises. Now, you know why they do that? Because when they fail, they feel so much worse than they would have felt had they not made a commitment. But let me tell you something. When you became a Christian, are you ready for this? When you became a Christian, you made a blanket commitment to do everything God said do. So whether you came up sometime later and said, well, you know, if someone come up to you and say, you know, I want you to make a commitment to love your enemy. You said, no, I don't make commitment. Well, you've already made that commitment if you're a Christian. When you become a Christian, you have made a commitment to do everything that God say do. And so now you set out on that journey, finding out what is it that he wants me to do. When I was sworn in basic training into the Air Force, when I was sworn in, I made a commitment to do whatever they asked me to do. I didn't have a clue what they was going to ask me to do, but I made a commitment to do it. And so whenever they came to me and gave me orders, guess what? I just went and did it. When they said to me, it's your day to get up at 4 o'clock and go go to the chow hall and peel potatoes. That's your day. Guess what? I didn't say, well, I never made a commitment for that. I didn't make a commitment for that. No, because there was a blanket commitment. And so when we become Christians, we are making a commitment to do whatever it is that God say do. And if we will honor our commitment, guess what? You will never lose your faith. So we ought to move forward believing I'm never going to lose my faith because I'm going to honor my commitment. It is up to me to be obedient to the commitment that I've made. Now, here's what happens. Now watch this, because I want you to see yourself, your friends, and other folk. See, the devil has a very powerful weapon, and it is called accusations. Do you know that a person can take accusations and make you feel as bad as they want you to feel? You remember when you was in elementary school and someone said, you smell. Now that's an accusation. Guess, you remember how bad you felt? Someone looked at you and said, you are ugly. You know how bad you felt? The devil uses accusations. So as the people of God, we've got to learn how to deal with accusation, because that's the devil's tool. He used accusation. See, that's why people would not make commitments, because they know if I make a commitment, the devil's going to come along and say, see, you didn't keep your commitment. You didn't keep your commitment. You didn't do what you said you was going to do. And he knows you're going to feel so bad. Now watch this. I'm going to take you to 2 other places in Scripture, and then we're going to be through. All right. The devil is our accuser. He victimizes us. Let's go to Revelation chapter 12. Revelation 12 and verse 7. Revelation 12 and verse 7. I want you to notice something that the Lord tells us. All right. Watch this. Revelation 12 and verse 7. And there was a war in heaven. You see that? Revelation 12 and verse 7. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. You see that? If you saw that, say amen. All right. Now watch this. The dragon and his angels waged war. And they were not strong enough. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down. Who is the dragon? The serpent, Satan, serpent of old, who is called who? The devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Now, who was thrown down? The dragon, the serpent, Satan, the devil. That's who he's called. Well, now, when he was thrown down, now what does he do? Look at verse 10. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of his brethren has been thrown down. The devil has one job, and that's to walk around accusing people. Now, let me ask you a question. Take your deep breath. Now, don't get mad. Now, how often do you act like the devil, walking around accusing people? When you go around, that's the devil's job. Listen, that's the devil's job. The devil's job is to go around accusing the people of God. See, now watch this. See, that's what happened to those who lost their faith. They started making accusations against the church. And then they became disobedient and they lost their faith, and then they accepted the invitation to go worship with the devil's people. Accusations. Listen, accusations are powerful. You know, accusations will make A students act like F students. When they start being told you are stuck up, you are the teacher's pet. What's the name for the teacher's pet in school? What do you call the students now? Telltale. What else? There's another. Brown nose. You know, listen, children can take the term brown nose and make an A student start acting like a C student so he'll fit in. I'm telling you, accusations. You ever bought something and somebody looked at it and said, "Ooh, that's ugly"? What'd you do? You found the ticket and took it back to the store. Accusations. That's the devil's job. That's the devil. He accuses. You went to the beautician and stayed there 5 hours and got a hairstyle and came, and somebody said, "Ooh, that's ugly." And you went and washed it out right away. You see? That's the devil's job. And Christians end up doing the devil's job for him and don't even get paid. That's terrible. The devil is always looking for people to accuse folk. I remember you when. I remember so-and-so said. The devil's job is accusing. And so now watch this. He is an accuser. And he accuses people and they become victimized. They didn't live up to their previous commitment. See, you got to know what you believe and then do. Now, let me take you, I'm going to take you into a little quick story in the Bible, and I'll tell you where it is, and you can read it when you go home, but you're already familiar with it. See, now, here's what you got to do. Now, watch the people of God who resolution was inconsistent, their participation, rather, was inconsistent with their resolution. I'm going to read some verses to you. You remember it when I tell you. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. Amen. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And you, when once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Now that's what Jesus said to Peter. Now watch Peter's resolution. But he said to him, Lord, with you, I'm ready to go to prison and to death. You see that? You see Peter's commitment? You see his resolution? He said, I'm not only ready to go to prison, I'm ready to die. Listen to Jesus' response. I say to you, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied me 3 times that you know me. You see Peter's resolution? Now let's watch his behavior. Let's watch his behavior. Having arrested him, they led him away and brought him to the house of the high priest. But Peter was following at a distance. Where's Peter? You said you were ready to die. After they kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter was sitting among them. And a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the firelight and looking intently at him, said, this man was with him too. But he denied it, saying, woman, I don't know him. You see that? A little later, another saw him and said, you are one of them too. But Peter said, man, I'm not. About an hour had passed. Another man began to insist, saying, certainly this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean too. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you're talking about. Immediately while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had told him, before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. I've just read from you from from Luke chapter 22. But now you know something that happened? Now watch this. I'm going to read something else for you. Entering the tomb. Now, these are the women who came to the tomb the first day of the week after Jesus had been crucified. They saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. Now listen to this. But go tell his disciples and Peter. He is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Amen. Now, Peter denied the Lord. Judas betrayed the Lord. You know the difference between the two? Watch this carefully. Judas, when he got in trouble, he stayed away from the Lord's people. He went over and hung out with the people who got him in trouble. He went back to the chief priest, the very folk who got him in trouble. Now notice what Peter did. Peter denied the Lord, but guess what? He stayed with the Lord's people. He stayed with the Lord's people. So when the women came back to Jerusalem to tell them that that the angel had given them a message, guess where they saw Peter? They saw Peter with the Lord's people. See, here's what the devil does. He wants to offer accusations to get you away from the Lord's people. And when he gets you away from the Lord's people, guess what? You're going to lose. You're going to lose. So if you want to keep your faith, I don't care what happens, don't leave the Lord's people. Because if you leave the Lord's people, you're going to end up hanging yourself just like Judas did. Judas went to the people who got him in trouble, and they wouldn't help him. Peter stayed with the people who could get him out of trouble. But see, here's what the devil does. He comes along and he makes an accusation. And he said, you are a hypocrite going to church. And guess what? People feel so bad. Guess what? They leave the people who can help them. And they go out there with the people who got them in trouble in the first place. But see, that's how the devil uses accusations. So what you've got to do is to know who you are. Know who you are and not be bothered by what people say. You know, my name is John. If somebody woke up and looked at me and called the name Henry, it doesn't bother me. If somebody come up to me and say, you fat, ignorant person, that's not me. They're not talking to me. Even if they're looking at me, they didn't describe me. So I don't have to be upset. So you got to learn how to not allow the devil's accusations to affect you. Everybody who loses their faith, it starts when they buy into the devil's accusations. And now here's what's so crazy about it. What the devil does when he brings an accusation against some people, and then he gets you away from those people, and guess what? You start acting just like the people he brought the accusation against. Isn't that amazing? Now watch this. He started off talking about hypocritical church people. And now he's got you being just like a hypocrite. Isn't that amazing? They lost their faith. Why? Because their personal participation contradicted their religious resolution. Here is how you ensure that you'll always be faithful to the Lord. Just decide I'm going to make a resolution and I'm going to keep it. It's just that simple. The devil does not have enough power to take you away from your resolution unless you start mumbling and grumbling and then accepting an invitation for the people who get you in trouble. The high priest got Judas in trouble. And when he came to them, they couldn't help him. And he was so overwhelmed. He was so overwhelmed that there was nobody there to receive him. And so he committed suicide. Peter was overwhelmed. The Bible said he went out and wept bitterly. But guess what? There was somebody there to receive him. Why do believers lose their faith? Their personal participation contradicts their religious resolution. And when that happens, they end up doing what they never envisioned they would do. God loved us so much. He wants us to be saved. Amen. And he wants us to start that journey. Now, sometimes people will not even make a commitment to be saved because in their mind, well, what if I don't keep my commitment? Well, what if you do keep your commitment? See, that's the devil's accusation. He said, now don't you make no commitment. Don't you become a Christian because you know you can't live right. He said, now you know you're a teenager and you can't live right. You know you single and you can't live right. You know you can't live right living in Anderson. There's some ungodly folk here. You got to wait till you move to Charlotte where the Christians are. Or you got to wait until you get a job somewhere else. The devil accuses us and he makes us believe you can't be a Christian until you get somewhere else. And that is just not true. You need to put your stake down where you are and God will help you be a faithful believer. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Just make sure that your personal participation is consistent with your religious resolution. You start that journey believing that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, repenting of your sin, confessing him to be Lord in Christ, and being baptized in water. And when you are baptized, you are making a commitment to God. You're saying, God, I'm going to honor whatever you say do. I don't know what all you're going to ask me to do, but whatever it is, I'm going to put forth my best effort to do it. And then do exactly what Peter did. When you find out that you didn't keep your commitment, stay with the people of God, and they'll help you get back to where you need to be. See, if you stay with the people of God, you'll always get back. But what the devil does, he wants to invite you over here, away from the people of God, and you will never win when that happens. In a moment, we're going to be standing and singing hymn number 195. 195 says, he will come and save. The Lord will come and save. He will come and save. He's already come and he's made salvation available. And if you have wandered away, if you have slipped into unbelief, then your problem is not somebody else. Your problem is inside of you. You would have never lost your faith if you had kept participating. If you had kept participating. If you had kept participating, you would have never lost your faith. But you stopped participating. You started mumbling, started grumbling, stopped participating, and then before long, you accepted an invitation to assemble with the people who were contrary to the Lord. 195. He will come and save. Let's stand and sing 195. He will come and save. To those who are fearful hearted, do not be afraid. The Lord your God is strong with his mighty arm when you call on his name. He will come and save. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Say to the weary one, your God will surely come. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Lift up your eyes to him. You will arise again. He will come and save you. Say to those who are feeling hearted, do not lose your faith. The Lord your God is strong with his loving arms when you call on his name. He will come and save. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Say to the weary one, your God will surely come. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Lift up your eyes to him. You will arise again. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Step through the weary one. Your God will surely come. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. He will come and save you. Lift up your eyes to him. He will arise again. He will come and save you. Lift up your eyes to him. You will arise again. He will come to save you. Lift up your eyes to him. You will arise again. He will come and save